of the pieces that we feel like we can control to help mitigate the experience that children have once they're detained is to, if nothing else, let them know the rights that are being violated, and then also let them know like what to expect, because usually children that are arrested from the homes in the middle of the night, they're sitting in the back of a Jeep on the floor with, 2 benches with soldiers above them, bound, blindfolded, right? They don't know where they're being taken. They don't know what's coming next. So we want to try to lay out that experience so that we can mitigate any trauma.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. Millions of people in Brazil went on strike on June 14th. It was a general strike. There were demonstrations in 380 cities across Brazil. The strike had been called to protest the so-called reform of the pension system by the far-right Bolsonaro government. But sentiment went far beyond that. The words "fora Bolsonaro" mean Bolsonaro out. This is the way to fight. In Hong Kong, a demonstration of 1 or 2 million people challenged a law that's being proposed that would cripple Hong Kong's legal autonomy from the Chinese government. In Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, the first elected president of Egypt, died in a soundproof prisoner's witness box during one of the trials against him. He died supposedly of a stroke. There's no evidence that court officials tried to resuscitate him. The Egyptian government has been accused of giving inadequate medical care to him and knowing that this treatment would be fatal to Morsi. And in the Russian-occupied Crimea, 5 Tatars were sentenced to between 12 and 17 years for being part of a so-called terrorist organization. The group's supporters say the group is peaceful and is completely legal under the laws of Ukraine, of which Crimea is a part. The message on the backs of the little boys on the right says, "Free my papa." This is video of a sit-in in Melbourne, Australia, of young people demanding climate action. Remember the upcoming September 20th worldwide climate strike. Now to the first part of the recent program in New Haven about solidarity with Syrians and Iranians. Dylan Connor talks and then sings his song about Idlib.
Unfortunately, here we are talking about the horrors of what's been happening in Syria, and I'm looking forward to learning more about Iran in this program as well, because I've been so laser focused on Syria for 8 years. I've just devoted myself to this cause, and I haven't felt able to really insert myself into another cause, because I just feel like it's such a big one unto itself. And obviously, Iran plays a part in the Syrian issue, and so those aspects I'm aware of, but I do look forward to hearing about Iran tonight and the grassroots struggles there. I am born and raised in Connecticut, married to a Syrian woman who was studying at the University of Bridgeport when we met in 2003. Now we have a family and a home in Stratford. And so when she moved over here, she was 21, and her parents told her one thing: do not marry an American and stay in America. Please, come back. and so it's ironic, I guess, but her family are just the sweetest people, and as I found out when I traveled to Syria, I mean, they're just an amazing nation of people. They're just beautiful, beautiful people with a beautiful culture that I completely fell in love with. I felt like it was something I'd been looking for my whole life, was this community they had there. And I realized, you know, they're living. Like, I'd go there in the summers and they were living their lives. It was something that was just not what I'm used to in our race of a culture we're in to make money and to gain status and whatever. It was so refreshing. I guess especially in the summers, Syria is this place where everyone would come back to. Because, you know, a lot of people weren't making good money in Syria and went elsewhere to make money, you know, to make a living. At least in my wife's family, I can talk about that perspective. And they'd come back for the summer. It was the whole summer in Syria, just constantly hanging out with family. I mean, I think 40 people came to the airport to pick us up the first time I went. I'm not kidding. You know, cars and cars, and you know, it just whisked us into this summer of meeting every family member and just learning so much. It was just awesome. And so that was 2007 and 2009. And then in 2011, the Arab Spring came to Syria. And it changed everything. And my family my wife's family, what I call my family now, were from Daraa. And that's where some of the first major protests happened that were greeted by violence. Essentially what happened is that some kids scribbled on a wall anti-regime slogans on a school, I think. And they were arrested. They aged from like 7 to the teens, maybe 16, 17 years old. And they came back home with signs of torture, fingernails pulled out, burn marks, things like that. And the town just went nuts. They rose up and were so offended and so disgusted by the treatment of these children. And so my family were some of those people who took to the streets and protested this treatment and the way this government was acting. And it just was a spark and set off this whole protest movement that turned into the big mess it is now. From a protest movement, peaceful protest movement, to an armed rebellion, to international, everybody in the world seems to have a footprint in there now, or their hands in it, and the people who are dying are the Syrian people, as the international community plays it like some kind of geopolitical chess match or something. Anyway, so through the horror of all this and family members being arrested and not knowing if they're ever going to come home again, and people I'd come to love there, and then picturing them in those prison cells, it's just horrifying. Hard to sleep at night when a relative's in jail in Syria, and the stories they told me after getting out of the prisons were, I mean, it's just beyond your worst idea of what a human can do to each other. So my way of dealing with all this is just music, songs. And I want to sing a song, it's one of the more recent songs that focuses on this place called Idlib, which is now the last refuge, standoff place for people who oppose the regime. There are approximately 3 million people in Idlib who have been who either lived in Idlib, but half of them probably at this point come from other places in Syria that have been overtaken by the regime, and then these people are bused to Idlib, so they're called internally displaced people, IDPs. And so Idlib is full of people who've been tossed around from place to place and have nowhere left to go. This is it. This is the last place left that the regime and Russia and Iran have not completely taken back. And it's a critical moment right now. And bombings are occurring there every day, basically from Russia and the Assad regime, just bombing civilians on a daily basis under the pretext that we're bombing terrorists, because the group that kind of took over the major power, or really kind of in power in terms of a rebel group, are called HTS, Hayat Tahrir Sham, and they are an extremist group. So it's a perfect excuse for Russia to bomb anyone and anything I don't know what the numbers of HTS are in the area, but if you got 3 million civilians, I'm guessing maybe, 5, 10,000 terrorists, let's say, or extremists, if you want to call them that. It's no excuse to go raining barrel bombs and phosphorus bombs indiscriminately on neighborhoods. Every day we have to watch now these little kids being pulled out of the rubble, burned. Today I saw a girl burned from head to toe. Fathers pulling their kids out of the rubble, kids seeing their parents dead in the rubble. Every day, today, it's happening, today. And it just kills me. It kills me, and I'm sick of it. It's been too long. And no one's stopping it. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems we have right now is that if people are left abandoned to this kind of fate, and children are witnessing this on a daily basis, what are they going to become? They're not getting an education. These beautiful people, this beautiful culture I talked about before, it's like these kids have seen nothing but horror and fear. And when the world doesn't come to your rescue, and you live in a world that won't save the innocent, that's just not an acceptable thing. So this song's for Idlib. In the fall, Idlib rose up in protest again, and it looked like 2011 again. I mean, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the street. Unfortunately, as I sing this song, it's painful because 2 people I mentioned in the song who were alive in the fall are now dead. Raed Faris and Abdul Sarut, 2 total heroes of the Syrian uprising. And very painful that I've lost them. So this is called The Revolution Lives. Sorry I talk so long. At this juncture in this thing, it's just really difficult. The revolution lives. The revolution never dies. All eyes are on Idlib, 'cause they're keeping it alive. Raed Faris is on the air. Radio Fresh fills the sky, doing what men would not dare. He's dodging bullets from both sides. Abdul Sarut is on the mic, leading a protest in the streets. It's just like 7 years ago. No surrender, no retreat. The revolution lives. The revolution never dies. All eyes are on Idlib, yeah, 'cause you're keeping it alive. Mahmoud is on the bridge above the Idlib highway sign, waving the revolution flag. Pride and defiance fill his eyes, and Rania Kaisar stands above, filming the thousands with one voice. She tells us all will go down, and on that day we will rejoice. The revolution lives. The revolution never dies.
Now more of the Q&A in the program about Palestine, no way to treat a child.
Kids throw stones, kids don't throw stones. Right? It sort of doesn't matter. They get arrested either way. It really comes down to the community that the child lives in. Right? There's specific communities where adolescent boys are targeted for arrest. That's it. Right? If you live in a community that's near a settlement, near one of the settler roads, near the separation barrier, the military base, anywhere where the occupation has its presence, these are the communities being targeted for arrest. Right? It's very much about furthering the control of the population. It's not about sort of any form of justice in any way. So that's kind of a long answer to a very straightforward question. But it's important because it gets to the heart of it. Right? This isn't something that, the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it's supposed to, because the goal is to fragment families, break down communities, and control a population. Right? And by arresting around 700 Palestinian boys, the majority age 15 to 17 every year, right, from these particular neighborhoods and communities that are bumping up against the physical presence of occupation, right? That's the way that control is maintained. And because fathers, mothers, they can't do anything to protect their kids when the military comes in the middle of the night. And that's not a new story. Right? This is a story that the children that we represent today, their fathers were detained. Their grandfathers were detained. Right? We're talking 52 years of occupation. This is the narrative, and it continues. So is everybody depressed? Okay. Yeah, Gay. Yeah, come back up. We'll do some questions on, and then I want to talk a little bit about the bill, so that we don't have to press you.
So how do the children or the parents know to call you?
So they have the numbers of the, our offices, and we have a field, someone on field who all the time in contact with the families, and we have several, we have the main offices in Ramallah, and we have sub offices in both Nablus and Hebron, which we are, and family tells family, and they tell each other. But the thing is that even when we get announced, about the arrest at the time, we just don't have the ability to get to the child at the time, because at the first couple of hours of the arrest, the child is not being registered in any system, so he's undocumented. His arrest is yet undocumented, and that's why we have difficulty tracing the child.
And I'd say too, so we do know your rights trainings in schools with the Ministry of Education, so that we can because one of the pieces that we feel like we can control to help mitigate the experience that children have once they're detained is to, if nothing else, let them know the rights that are being violated, and then also let them know what to expect, because usually children that are arrested from their homes in the middle of the night, they're sitting in the back of a Jeep on the floor with 2 benches with soldiers above them, bound, blindfolded, right? They don't know where they're being taken, they don't know what's coming next, so we want to try to lay out that experience so that we can mitigate any trauma in a small way, right? And then that's also, I think, the staff that we have, Priscilla, long week. Shayna and myself are 2 of our international staff. Everybody else is Palestinian, working in our offices on the ground, essentially working in their own communities. So that network gives us access and trust within those communities, so that Hassan in Hebron says, my cousin or my cousin's family, their son was arrested, and then Farah's in touch with the family to try to figure out where the child is and try to see when he'll first appear in the military court, and then that's how our legal representation sort of attaches from the first moment. We also, sort of, if a child in the military courts and doesn't have a lawyer at the time, Farah or one of our other attorneys will, represent them for that initial hearing, because that initial hearing is essentially extending their detention to the end of legal proceedings. So we represent them for that, unilateral decision by the military judge, and then talk with their families and see what the family wants to do after that. And so that's sort of how our legal representation looks in practice.
So back to some of your challenges with the issues that lawyers get. Is that harassment, or is it, are sometimes you arrested as well, the lawyers?
No, not arrested, but I get to be harassment, I get such, I was attacked actually before a couple of months in one of the children's hearing by one of the legal consultant of a right-wing organization, NGO Monitor, which monitor, not so monitor, but they try to trace the Palestinian human rights work and try to delegitimize the work that we do. And I was attacked because he was the person who was there, he was the former military prosecutor in the military court, so I knew him personally. And he just started yelling about what I write on my Facebook page about defending the children, especially Fawzi's Genedi's case. And he was showing one of the Jewish family member, a victim, a Jewish victim member who was present during a hearing of one of the child, showing him what I wrote, and and on the other hand, the Jewish member, the Jewish parent, was yelling at me as well as of why I do not write about other things. So it gets scary sometimes, but we try our best to continue our work without any conditions or pressure from any other side. We try our best.
Hold on a second. I'll come your way after these two.
Should I go first? Yeah. So, what is the name of your firm? Is it funded totally by the American Friends Service Committee? How many people are on the staff? Are there other people doing this work? Are there other firms doing this work?
Yeah, so we're a local Palestinian organization, Defense for Children International Palestine. American Friends Service Committee does not provide us any funding. We have funding through UN agencies like UNICEF, the United Nations Development Program, a number of European-based civil society NGOs that support our work. European governments, the UK Consulate General provides us funding for our legal work. The EU, we have a number of North American groups too. Yeah, we have
us, right?
What's that?
And us, right?
Yeah, and individuals that are generous enough to support our work. So it's that's sort of the background. There's other organizations. Oh yeah, so we're about 40 full-time staff. Farah, Adnan, we could list through the lawyers. We also represent kids in the Palestinian courts. So we cover child rights throughout the occupied Palestinian territory, whether it's Palestinian actors or Israeli actors.
So for 3 weeks we've had segments of our show about the mistreatment of Palestinians. There's actually a bill in Congress that would ban use of U.S. money by Israel for these abominations. It's H.R. 2407. A recent co-sponsor is New Haven's Rosa DeLauro. Talk to your member of Congress about 2407. Peter Schaefer, a retired Princeton professor of Jewish studies and the director of the Jewish Museum in Berlin, Germany, was forced to resign by the high muckamucks of the Jewish community in Germany and Israel. His crime? A tweet sent out on the Twitter feed of the museum that linked to a statement signed by 240 prominent Jews criticizing the German parliament for calling BDS anti-Semitism. Now, the very establishment Jewish Telegraph Agency broke a story that a group of 45 Talmudic scholars have signed a letter in support of Peter Schaefer. The JTA said such a letter is unprecedented in the Talmudist community, which tends to shy away from commenting on current affairs. A good sign. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.